Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Higher Vibration Podcast. My name is Sarah Beer, and I'm the host. And today we are with the lovely Jamie Nelson. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's amazing to have you here. Jamie is a very talented woman who's got many specialties. Currently, she is offering intuitive courses as well as intuitive readings, astrology readings, human design, specializing in business development, and all things in wellness. So welcome.
Thanks, Sarah, for that introduction. I'm happy to be here.
It's awesome to have you here. So let's see, what are you drinking? Where's your cup?
Thanks for asking. I brought mermaid vibes today. We're having coffee, the elixir of the gods, of course. You know,
Same. I got my teacup, but it's got coffee in it today.
I love your teacup.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So,
Oh, I like that. It was a good suggestion. Makes it feel very cozy.
yeah, I'm here for the cozy vibes, because I would like in the future for other people who are listening, if they wanted to bring a drink and just hang out, that's kind of the vibe that I was hoping this would consist of. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
So, on this note, we are talking today all about void space and other liminal spaces and all of the fun and the journey behind that. Um, I think we should start with something that happened a few weeks ago when we had to reschedule, which is like we're talking about how we need to, we're trying to open a door, right? We're trying to open a door to our future and we're banging on the wrong door. And the door is like, why won't this door open for me? And then we have bloody knuckles. And then you literally had bloody knuckles and I had burnt hands. And it's
Right,
really,
right. Well, I feel like I wonder if we need to first like define what a liminal space is, right? Which you and I have been defining liminal space as like the hallways in life, right? Where you're just kind of stuck in this corridor. There's no doors, there's no windows. It feels dark. You're not sure where you're coming or where you're going. You don't want to go back to where you came from, like that liminal space being a very temporary space between where we were and where we're going, but not really quite knowing where that liminal space will lead.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, and then I absolutely, yes, I resonate with a couple of weeks ago, just like knocking on the walls, the doors, the windows, like just everything, like Jesus, when will this liminal space? I'm so bored of being here. And I think that's another feature of the liminal space is that it comes with a lot of boredom, right? It comes with a lot of like,
when will it end?
right, right. We're just kind of here, right? And sometimes I pair it with a functional freeze, honestly, where we're just kind of existing, taking it day by day, trying to move to the next step.
All you can do. It's like you feel like you're stuck in this perpetual space of nothing ever changing, and then you're like, but when will that shift?
Right. And it's like horrendous when the liminal space is not for like a week, right? It's
Like
like
years,
years,
years of
years of
liminal space.
liminal space, you know? And you're just like, is this hallway my new home? Like, and knowing truly that it's not, but still not knowing where it leads. You know, it's kind of like that hero in the desert vibe where you're just like walking and walking and walking and walking. You're like, where is the oasis?
Yeah. Yeah. I really think about the experience when we're sitting on your bed in that place and we're just looking at your literal hallway that leads to the other little room that's being converted into a space. And we're
My
like,
last home was a physical liminal space.
it was yeah, it was an actual liminal space. And we're like, look at this hallway. Look at this space. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that was a very like visceral mind brought into reality experience. Which I think as humans we tend to live those more than we are really conscious of, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of literal examples to what we're going through, and sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's only funny in a dark context. A lot of
Like
dark
one of those things
context.
where you have to laugh because like if not, like what are you gonna do?
Yeah, you're just gonna go crazy, so you might as well laugh to bring some kind of joy into the situation to help it. I don't know if dissipate is the word, but shift it somehow, some way, because you
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Mm.
now that we've defined the liminal space, I interrupted you in your initial presenting of the topic. So you were remembering like this moment a couple weeks ago, and what was happening this moment a couple weeks ago?
Oh, are we interviewing me now? Are we turning this around? What happened with me? Let's see. Well, change of career for me and everything shifting very quickly. And that is I'm starting to do this and other things. And then the doors are just like, time's up. You're gonna fly, little bird. Out you go. And I was like, oh. That's nice. Okay, I guess that's what I'm doing now. And then the same thing happened for you. And so it's like, oh, look at our beautiful parallel journeys. We kicked out of
Right.
and the comfortable, but like complacency comfortable. It's not really helping you grow, but you're like, oh, but it's supporting me, so I'm just gonna stay here even though it's past due.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that question was less meant to interview and more of a I want to make sure I was on the same train as you. But yeah, I do find it really interesting how our paths have been parallel through a lot of our lives. Right. I remember like many nights in South Florida just sitting on the pier talking about like similar life experiences and how they led us into these healing professions and into like really wanting to show up for others and to show up for ourselves and what that looked like for us and what a struggle it was while we were in such deep like liminal spaces, overcoming heartbreak, overcoming like mediocre jobs and difficulty with the economy and just human issues, right?
Yeah, it was really beautiful to have a friend in the liminal space. Highly recommend anybody out there who's like, I'm in the void space and my life sucks. Go find somebody else who's in the void space so you can be in the void space together. And it's like, it's better. Definitely better. Somebody should start a community online, void space online, find other people in the void space, and you can go meet up. That should be a thing.
100%, 100%. There were some really, really dark days in the void, and I really took a lot of comfort knowing that I wasn't just like alone floating there in the abyss by myself.
Yeah.
So
The helpers need help too.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, and it's hard to reach out as a helper, right? Because there's this preconceived like internal perception that you're meant to have the answers. And so it's almost when you're a healer, there's this fear of showing that part that's unhealed, which of course as humans we all have. But there's that fear of showing up and saying like, "Hey, I'm struggling right now."
yeah, and I think with most helpers, we feel like a burden whenever we ask anybody for help. So we're most likely not going to ask for help until we're in a really, really dark place. And even then, it's not going to be a thing until someone reads it on our face and is like, are you okay? Because you're not looking so okay. And then people cry because then it's like, oh, I'm finally given permission to talk about it because I don't want to be an issue to everybody. Because I give support to
Yeah.
everybody else, but God forbid, you receive support. So,
Well, it's like I think that there are all different types of wounding that lead into the healing path, right? But there are so many healers that struggle with that. Like I'm the one who shows up for everyone. I don't know what it's like to receive, right? And so I think that's another lesson that we've both encountered during this time in the liminal space where we've been really having to practice receiving, um, despite being raised and living our entire life, like really relying on that giving of energy, giving of resources.
Yeah, what are boundaries for 1,000 points? What are boundaries? That's the biggest
That
name of
was
the
like the
game.
theme of my entire last year.
It's like the theme of my life is boundaries, 12th house Aries. So, and we can talk astrology here. So this could be a fun episode for people who like that. Um, Another memory I was thinking about that I think is special, that holds a special place in my heart, is for Valentine's Day, where we both were on the beach at this like happy dancing beach thing on a Wednesday, and we were in the worst way, so depressed, so down. We drank a whole bottle of wine and cried and danced on the beach and like tried to just be happy. But it was nice to go through that together. And it's now I look back on it and I'm like, what a nice memory, even though it was really rough. Like, it can laugh about it now, but
In the moment, it was very, very rough. It was a very rough experience. We both were going through it. But I honestly look back at that memory too, and just like it gives me very much like Barbie girlhood vibes, right? Where you're just like, this is the worst fucking experience, but like I'm still human, right? I'm falling apart, I'm messy, but I'm dancing on this beach and I'm reminding myself, despite wanting to crawl into my bed, right? The beauty of being alive and the beauty of participating in something unexpected and chaotic and to some degree, depending on your belief system, right? I believe that we showed up to this human experience to experience that chaos.
that's a big statement.
Uh,
Yeah, we showed up to this experience for the chaos. We chose this. Look at these choices.
right. But I appreciate you for saying that because I that's really a girlhood memory for me too. Just like being on that beach and like finally opening my heart to trust that someone was open and ready and willing to hear my little like human suffering and show up like with so much support for that. And it really is a moment that I remember like feeling alive despite the doom and gloom surrounding the human experience.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. It's interesting how like some of those most intense moments can, stand out in those ways, and you don't know it in the moment that that's going to be something you look back on. Although I think we did make a comment when we're like, we're going to look back on this moment years from now and be like, look how far we've come from that rock bottom on the beach with a shitty bottle of red wine.
You made that comment and I did not believe you in that time. I was like, no.
Like
This
how
is a terrible
you're
moment.
like, no, this is bad, and we're not going to talk about this ever again. I'm like, oh, a little time traveler moment. I'm like, this is so bad. Let's pause and reflect on how bad this is and how we're gonna like remember this, but in a better
You
way.
You do have a beautiful way about you of like bringing attention to the present moment
Oh,
and
thank
really like filling it out. Whereas I feel like a lot of the human experience is living on autopilot and kind of like meandering from place to place, without that conscientiousness. And like you have such a beautiful presence about you that you're really bringing us into the present moment. You're bringing attention to what's happening in the here and now.
you. Oh, well, thank you, Jamie. That's very nice of you. I
Yeah, of
appreciate that
course.
thought. I think it's because I have like existential crisis moments so often that it forces me to be like in the moment and be like, how do I feel about this now and now and now? So I kind of like do it almost in a way that's it's a little too much, but it has positives sometimes, yes. But enough about me. Let's talk about some of your favorite experiences where things were really rough like that, but it's part of, what has made you who you are today. Like what do you think comes to mind, something that built your character, so to speak? The lore of Jamie.
Oh, you're asking about my origin story.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I have a very interesting chart. I have Sagittarius in my fourth house, which for me has meant perpetually moving, like every 2 years of my life. So it's meant new friend groups, new networks, lots of shifting houses. I like to tell a story that I had been to 13 schools by the time I was 13, right? There was just a lot of movement, a lot of chaos, and it's still kind of present in my life now where the idea of home and movement is always shifting. Um, but my current lore, I guess, is I had a fairly traumatized past as a child, right? As many humans do. And what that really led me to was a special interest in behavioral health, mental health, human behavior. Um, and like even as a very young child, I was very interested in all the ways you could know a human. So I remember like the first time looking at a tarot deck, I was 10, right? But I was also like reading psychology books. I was like very interested in why humans act and react in the way that they do. And that special interest led me to like becoming a therapist, right? Where I like really wanted to help people with their behavioral like issues, right? I have this beautiful ability to see behavioral patterns and like interrupt those patterns, right? And also cognitive patterns, right? Where we get caught in these repetitive thoughts and finding ways to interrupt that. And then I was a therapist for about 10 years, but actually really found it to be really limiting to the healing experience. I like love the things I know, right? But there are a lot of difficulties I've encountered in that career where I'm just like, wow, like there's a lot of limitations in healing here. And so that's led me to kind of expand outside of those horizons and integrate some of my other special interests. So even in the therapeutic space, I'm bringing astrology in, I'm bringing in human design, we're playing tarot cards, like we're reflecting, we're exploring in that therapeutic space. And then like noticing the more human you are, the safer people feel to heal, right? And so really starting to open up that therapeutic space to a more intuitive space, to like a coaching space. And so that's kind of the lore of career life. And of course, a lot of other things played into that, right? I don't think any effective therapist can stay in the profession like full time. So there were times when I had to dip in and out. When my ex-fiance and I broke up, that was a time where I had to dip out of therapy and just totally pursue inner teen life, right? But I think that like we're meant to shift and evolve as humans, and due to like so many shifts and evolutions, I just have this real ability to see the experience that someone else is having and relate to that, and offer like solace and comfort there.
Yeah, you hold space for people to like share and heal in a really powerful and beautiful way. So that is definitely one of your superpowers that's come through all of that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
I think about how we talk about like with your chart, how with the Cancer and the Pisces and the Virgo, that, you spend this time where, unlike other people, you have the energy that like asks you to sit in something and actually sit there for a long time. And most people tend to get up and move out of it quickly. Whereas your energy in your chart is asking you to really sit with things on a deeper level for a longer period of time, which is one, not easy, two, no one wants to be there, but three, it, like we've talked about, it creates a lot of wisdom for you because you get to look at things in such an intense way that most people don't even give the chance to go that deep, that you have all of this understanding about things emotionally that other people often would just bypass altogether. So for the work you do, that like adds all of those layers.
Yeah, thank you for the way that you articulated that. I think that I would call that like the emotional authority over time that pops up in my human design,
Mm.
where like it can be so frustrating because it really does take me a long time to make my decisions, to feel right about them. But that's my process, like really needing to sit with something to find what resonates. Um, and absolutely something that I've been uncovering throughout this lifetime is just paying attention to energetic flow, right? A lot of the skills I've picked up through astrology and human design have just given me a lot of like validation that it's okay to take your time and sit and resonate and marinate and learn from and move forward and move through, right? But there's a lot of sitting with, right? There's a lot of internal reflection for sure.
As you're talking about that, I just envision you like hosting retreats where you're inviting people to come and sit with all of their emotions and like be with them. And that's like one part. And then the other part is all about the magic and helping people rediscover themselves through like fun, magical means, like all of the things you just like, listed. I just saw that for you. I was like, oh, that's going to be really beautiful in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Like, I'm not sure if I'm sure you do know this, but when I started developing Kaleidoscope Initiative, I like really wanted it to be a healing experiment, right? With that awareness that like we all process and heal differently, and that like we're just kind of experimenting, we're just playing with what's gonna work, what we're gonna learn from, what we're going to lead with. And um it is a future plan of mine to create retreat spaces. I have lots of beautiful plans. For my 33rd birthday, I married myself and I had a self-commitment workshop and ceremony in which I invited everyone to participate in magically fun activities to encourage self-love and self-worth and self-reflection. Very like Cancer Sun, Pisces Moon.
I love that though. And you made a really beautiful arch for the ceremony. I wish we could show a picture of it because it was
Oh, my
magical.
temple.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I love I love creating sacred spaces, right? The idea there being that this space is just a place where your mind can rest, right? Where your heart can rest. And there's no pressure in this space. When we look there, it brings ease. When we sit there, right, there's nothing to do. It really plays with that energy of being.
Yeah. So many beautiful things. I am also thinking about what is it? So your recent experiences, we're talking about being in the void this past year and kind of the apathy that creeps in and pollutes
Mm,
everything. Um, but and how we were both in that space and that bitterness that comes in, and you're like, I just can't look or see positive things because you're just so beaten down that you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to look forward to. But then
right.
recently we've both had our breakthroughs and like having that door finally start to crack open and have the light shine in, and you're like, oh, this is really bright, and I don't know how to handle the light anymore. Like, what is this shining in my face after so much hardship? I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about that and like your gift to yourself to that retreat you went to for a week, if you want to talk about that.
Thanks, Sarah, for bringing that up. That was a really beautiful experience. Yeah, it's when you're in that liminal space, it's almost like swimming through molasses where you just feel so stuck, you get so tired, right? And you're like, I can't stop, or I'm just gonna sink to the bottom, but also I can't move any further. Um, And at that point, right, and I do think it ties in with functional freeze, but at that point, when you are like just absolutely frozen, I do believe that we need an external movement to kind of catapult us out of that space of molasses, out of that quicksand of life, right? And so a little gift I gave myself this year was I went on this beautiful intuitive healing retreat. They did intuitive energy healings. I had a shamanic healing. It was a very like one of the most woo-woo things I've ever done, and I
I love
absolutely
it.
adored it. Yeah,
Love
I
it.
adored it. It was so fun. Um, but it was wild because you could actually like feel the energy shift, right? So I'm sitting there in this intuitive healing and come out of it. And she's like, well, what did you think? And I was like, oh, you were waging a war inside of my body because I'm just having all these little moments flicker through my mind of times where I felt guilt or shame or heartbreak or and I'm just noticing them pop up and kind of release, pop up and release like little bubbles, kind of like they teach you in meditation, just like observing these bubbles float away. And I felt this very physical energy shift. And I remember coming home and after a couple days chatting with you and letting you know that like while I had been in this and I am telling you I was at the bottom of the pit of despair, right? I just like there was no hope. I could not see the light, right? Um it was almost like someone threw me a little rope and was like, "Oh, it won't always be like this," right? And nothing changed immediately after that. I could just tell my energy was just a little bit more hopeful. Like I remember
A lot more
like
hopeful.
returning to you with that and being like, wow, like I'm experiencing hope for the first time in months and it just feels like such a light, such a lift, right? And since then like things have happened that like I think for a lot of people would be very distressing things. And my reaction has been like gratitude, right? So you had kind of recently mentioned how we both got released from our mediocre jobs, right? Which like on one hand, right, it's a very like worldly like anxiety raising experience to like lose this known income. Luckily we both have diversified incomes, but
Yes.
like very like difficult experience to lose a job. And yet I remember like feeling relief. Like I'm like, oh, now that this is ending, it creates space for something new to arrive, something new to emerge. Right. And so just that like the biggest difference being that element of hope and gratitude, like whereas like had this happened before this energetic healing cleanse, right, I would have been like, well fuck, this is just another thing to add to the bottom of the pile, right? So it really perspective shifts everything, and sometimes you need that external energy to come in and shift that, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing as you share this. I'm seeing like for anybody who's in the void space currently, you sometimes need to change your environment or people in your life in order to help you shift out of this quicksand energy that is drowning you. And like, yeah, you taking the time and being like, you know what? Financially, this might not make sense, but I'm taking a week to take care of myself and I'm going to go and do this. And And that was actually what you needed. And I remember talking to you on the phone and being like, you're like, yeah, like I believe in like good things again. And I feel so positive. And I'm like, who is this person? Because I met you when you were at your darkest pit, and I would try to convince you, like, things could be good again. And you'd be like, yeah, maybe. Like, I
I
don't know
was
about
so
that. You were
doubtful.
like,
Yeah,
I love that for you. It would be like,
100%, 100%.
yeah, and it was
Right?
just
Like,
couldn't touch it. You wouldn't touch it. You're like, that's cute. No. And it was funny, but it was also like, oh no, like in a rough spot. And then so to see that shift with you being like, no, I can see good things and I just feel hopeful. I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God. I'm so happy to see that for you. And it's just like now we have to hold that. We have to not what's the word? Cultivate. Cultivate the hope, grow the hope, help it come back to life. And then
yeah, absolutely. I mean, to kind of tie this back in with that like healing persona that we share, right? Like sometimes we can carry this internal wounding that the healing we share with everyone else is for them, right? That healing isn't for us. And so while like I'm over here with the belief that everyone intrinsically deserves to heal, right? I'm also simultaneously, my inner child is holding the belief, right? Except you, right? And so while you're like, oh, this will shift, I'm like, when? Like it's just been a lifetime of bullshit, right? At this point, I'm just totally fed up. But like there were a lot of things I did this year to just try to shift out of that liminal space. One of them, as you know, was moving out of the state of Florida back to the mountains.
yeah.
So the energy of where I was living, it was a very dead space. And when I say dead space, I just mean like in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing happening. And I was surrounded by dysfunction, right? I was living on a sober living farm. Everyone was there with their like chaos, right? And so just being in that chaotic environment, having that experience of like, many of the people I worked with also lived on this farm. And it was just like the entire time I was in Florida was just this chaos filled experience where I felt like I was showing up for everyone else and didn't have the space, time, energy, effort to show up for myself. And so I made this pretty drastic change, right? Even at that time. And that was back in March where I was like, I might lose my job, but I can't live here anymore, right? I can't be here anymore. And I think that was the beginning of seeing the light at the end of the hallway where I was like, oh God, it's not completely dark. And then after I got here, allowing myself just to open more ways, right? Allowing myself to like be outside and explore the mountains and go to healing spaces and open up to new opportunities. And I really think like when you're in the void, we have to make space for the beautiful things to enter. Like there's an energy of being in the void of like self-protection where we're pushing everything away from us because we're like, God, I'm just trying to stay safe, right? I'm so scared. There's no illumination, right? I'm just stuck in this bubble. But the irony of the void is that the more that you allow more energy into your space, the more that you allow yourself to connect with others, the less terrifying the void becomes, and the more you start to realize that you're not there alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it doesn't have to be constant hell. It doesn't have to, it just feels weird and it doesn't feel fun. And it's interesting, as you're talking about your story, I'm just thinking about, boundaries. Like you didn't come to Florida because you wanted to come to Florida. Somebody kind of convinced you to come to Florida, and you're like, okay, I guess I'll move to Florida. And then that person left, and then you're just stuck in Florida alone. And then you're living in this space where people are who you work with, they're also there. And so you have no privacy. You can't be a person because if you, God forbid, you have some wine and you're a therapist and you say the wrong thing to somebody, like it's just was not a good situation for you. Yeah, and you had to be challenged.
Right.
And you're just sitting here. You're like, I've been here for a year. We're just like sitting on your little swinging, was it under the tree? Was it attached to the tree? Sitting under
Mhm.
this tree and a little swinging bench, and we're just like, yeah, I've been here for a year and I don't even know like what I've done. Like I've just existed and it's just been a stale
Right.
place of nothing happening and I don't know what to do with this. And yeah, it's uncomfortable, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, you beautifully described that, right? That energy of being there, I just felt like, I think to some degree we all have like a little mask that we wear at work or that we wear around our coworkers or in our bosses. And living in the same, like I was living in a converted hotel, right? So I'm sharing a
I wish
hotel
I could show
with
pictures. Like
God.
you have your own kitchen now. It's magical.
It is magical. Instead of a closet kitchen,
A
converted a closet
closet
into a
with a
kitchen space.
fridge. Yeah, your coffee maker, the sacred coffee maker. Amazing. It was like I was like, for what this space is, you've really made it come a long way. Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
But
Very
yeah, there was no
resourceful.
space to be authentic. It was always like, and maybe I could have been right, but there was always this energy of needing to be on, right? Even if I'm like walking my dog in the morning, someone's asking me about a work project, and like no one should have to live that way.
No, you should just be able to enjoy your mornings, not at work, not thinking about work. But also, like, people need the context of this place, okay? There's like goats roaming around, jumping on top of like golf carts and cars and eating every plant in sight and knocking things over. And there's like dogs and horses. It was like a whole farm. And you're like an hour outside of civilization. You're just out in the middle of nowhere. So anytime you want to go see anyone or do anything, you have to drive an hour into town. It was quite
Yeah.
a situation. Like I remember sitting there being like, wow, what an existence this is in this moment for you. Like, you've normalized it, but there's nothing normal about like that situation. You're like, yeah, I'll just drive into town. I'm like it's like an hour for you to drive into your town.
Right. It's
And
like
you're
an
like,
hour
oh,
to
it's
drive to work
fine.
every day.
I'm used to it. I'll come meet up for you for a drink and then drive an hour back to go home.
Yeah, no, it was wild. It was wild. Actually, the more you talk about it, the more gratitude I have that the energy has shifted, right?
Yeah,
I'm
I was
just
like, what a
like,
trial. What a trial that was for you. And I'm like, oh, thank
but
God that,
it was interesting because it was a point of suffering that to some degree I created for myself, right? Like, at that point in my life, I decided to separate myself from my entire social network, right? Telling myself because I'm already in this voided space that I'm a burden to everyone else, right? So I self-isolate by moving all the way to South Florida to live on this farm because it's where I can afford in West Palm, right? Fucking West Palm prices. Oh my bad. Um, and I'm just like I was telling myself that this is what it is, right? Without even giving myself the opportunity to look into like other spaces. So it's like to some degree, and this isn't going to be fair and it's not going to be true for everyone, but to some degree we create our own suffering, right? And not every situation, right, at all. But for me, in this situation, right, it was very much I isolated myself onto this farm to have this experience because I thought it would bring more financial security and that balance of what brings your heart joy versus like what do we really need to survive? Like what do we really need to enjoy this life, to move forward in this life? to be present and show up for those unhealed traumas.
Yeah. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I mean, I feel like this could be partially true for you, but I realized in retrospect now is true for me. It's like being in a space that you don't really want to be in, but this is what you're going to be in for a while, and that's just part of it. Um, and and realizing in retrospect that it was kind of like a cocoon. It was a cocoon, and yes, it's a void space, and yeah, you're like, oh my God, when is this ever going to end? But you also it's like a time where you're cultivating something within yourself that needs to be cultivated, that literally can't be cultivated if you were just out constantly moving and having everything work out for you. Like you wouldn't grow this aspect of yourself. You wouldn't learn this, whatever it is that you needed to learn during this hermit time. And I've settled into for myself that I was like, oh, I guess I needed that. For me, it was like I needed to release like the burdens of like the last 4 years of my life, and I had to let them all die. And I couldn't let it fully be released, I guess, until I just sat in that space for over half a year and was just like, okay, I guess that's what I needed to finally release this thing that was holding me back in a lot of ways. And I had to have like what felt like a literal death for me in order to come into this space that I'm in now where it's like no longer there for some reason. So I don't know if that's something you feel from part of your experience as well, where like there was an aspect of you cultivated through that hermit phase.
Yeah, no, I love the metaphor that you presented, right? Because when we think about that caterpillar being in the cocoon, right, it's not a nice experience. Like the caterpillar's body is disintegrating into a goo to be completely like rebuilt, reshaped, remade. Like probably an incredibly painful experience to have your body just like disintegrates and be rebuilt, right, in that cocoon. And it was very much the space of that, right? It was very much the space of like having to sit in the discomfort, right? While like building up the courage to move into, right, a life that I wanted or to move into an energy that I wanted. And, for me, that was where I started building, like I had already had the idea for the Kaleidoscope Initiative, this self-love experiment, that was kind of encompassing all of my special interests. But that's where I started building it out and being like, I can't be in this space forever, working for other people, like doing things that don't resonate with my soul, right? Like what does resonate, and like really having that courage and building that courage to move towards it. And then again, I think like the support of friends can't be underestimated. So between like really your undying support, right? And my friend Zoe, right? Just the both of you being like, listen, like you have the skills. What are you waiting on? Where's the disconnects between believing in yourself? And it kind of reminds me of this feeling of coming out of that cocoon, and like I don't know that the caterpillar knows that he's transformed right away, right? I think everything is so uncomfortable while he's trying to figure out like why can't I move the same way throughout this world, and like what is it like to stretch these wings, and I don't even have the awareness that I can fly. And I think that this transformation that we go through is a lot of like a slow recognition that we've changed and allowing ourselves to fill out these new bodies, these new energetic spaces.
That's beautiful. I love that. I think you should let everybody know what a kaleidoscope is, right?
Oh, thanks, sir.
Your kaleidoscope
So
initiative makes sense with this whole analogy.
it does actually. I think that's why I was prepared for it really, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So when I started my therapeutic practice, I called it Mariposita, which is a small butterfly, right? And it was meant to signify the small shifts that we make, right? Even the shift of a butterfly's wings, which can cause earthquakes somewhere else, but the small shifts that we make on our pathway to change, right? And then like a kaleidoscope, most of us know it as like this little device you peer through, you make slight shifts in movement and it changes the image. And I love that idea of just like a slight shift can change the image of your life. And I really think that's a lot of what's coming out of the void is about making that slight shift and changing the perception, choosing to see the broken pieces as beautiful. But then I was delighted to find out that a kaleidoscope is also the word for a grouping of butterflies,
Amazing.
right? Right.
I love that
And
so
all
much.
of the many ways that we heal come together to allow us to like form this beautiful new perspective over our lives and really take power in like the flight of like grouping that happens with our healing, right? Because as we're healing, we're not just healing one area of ourselves. Like it's all connected in this massive web, right? And so as we're healing one little piece, we're healing another little piece. And I really think that butterflies and the kaleidoscope that they represent create such a beautiful image of like what it's like to live this life as a human and to like heal in tiny ways, in small shifts, creating like massive life changes for us individually and as a collective.
Well said. That was
Thanks.
really beautiful. You know, to like make a quote caption of all of those things you just said. It was really nice. It was beautiful.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like the butterfly is like the literal representation of the phoenix because there's nothing else that disintegrates its body and then just comes back with like wings in a whole new form. Although I guess the phoenix technically already had the wings to begin with. But yeah, so therefore the butterfly is actually more badass than the phoenix because the butterfly, like the caterpillar, didn't have wings before. Like the phoenix always had the wings, but the butterfly, like was a caterpillar that literally like created, let itself become goo and then formed wings.
Right. Well, and I just love this idea that like you spend your whole life like knowing and becoming accustomed to what it's like to like crawl on the earth and thinking that is the only way that we will ever move through this life, right? It reminds me of kind of my upbringing in that scarcity, poverty type level life, and then how different life is once you realize that you have wings, right? That you can be expansive, that you can travel faster from place to place, that the world looks different from a different perspective, from a different viewpoint, and like how expansive life becomes when you like remove yourself from that place of origin.
Beautiful. Yeah. I also think about what I just had a thought. What was it? Okay, so there's a saying. There's the day you born, there's two, what is it? There's two times in your life that you're born. The day that you're born and then the day that you realize why. And I feel like the second one that you're born again when you realize why is because like that's when you recognize your wings. That's when you recognize like what you're here to offer. And I also think it's important to mention it's like we put a lot of emphasis on life purpose and like what are you supposed to be and sometimes it's not tied to your career. Sometimes it's just like the way that you are with strangers gives them hope in their life, and you don't even realize you're doing that. You know, it can be these little things, and it doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing that's like, oh, my life purpose is to be like Tony Robbins or something, right? It doesn't have to be this larger than life thing. It could be this something that you perceive as small, but is actually making huge shifts for people and but in your own area, you know? It's like I don't know where I'm going with that, but I'm thinking about that in regards to having our wings. The wings could just be our awareness of like what is our area of genius? Like what is our area that we have something to offer that is special in the world in a sense that we're really good at that in a certain way that, helps the collective or the planet or both.
No, I love that idea. And I also think it's important to mention that like even things like purpose, right, can evolve and shift throughout life, right? Like we tend to define our purpose as this like big picture thing, right? But I really think that we find purpose here anytime we're aligning with joy, right? Anytime that we are aligning with like something that evolves us, that shifts us forward, right? And that our purpose can be found in like a smile to a small child, right? Or like helping an elderly person with a difficult task for them, right? Like there are so many ways that we evolve and adapt throughout this life that I believe that our purpose also evolves and adapts with that. So like I think it's fully possible that my purpose as like a small child was to point out the problems in the household, which made me a scapegoat, right? And my purpose as a teenager was to be disruptive and to cause problems, right? To disrupt those patterns that were happening. And at different times in our life, we hold different purposes. And that's okay, right? That it's okay that we don't do the same thing for the rest of our life, and that might actually be the goal. The goal might actually be allowing the shift. And I think there's so much grief that can occur as we're releasing previous adaptations of self, right? Like maybe that caterpillar really misses the way his body felt close to the ground, right? Very safe there in that ground space. But that the more acceptance we can have through these transitions, the more ease we're going to have as we're redefining our purpose, evolving and adapting.
Very well said. Um, what would be how would I phrase this? What would you say is what is driving your joy right now? What sparks joy? What
That's
sparks
such
joy
a
for Jean?
beautiful question, Sarah, and I appreciate you sharing it. It's so funny, right? Because I think right now I'm looking for moments that make me feel alive, right? So like immediately after losing my job, even though I had anticipated it, even though I was relieved and actually grateful, right? There was a weight lifted. There was still kind of this residual grief amongst like, now we have to shift again, and where are we shifting to? And it was just like this heavy weight of like, now we have to do more work. I'm freaking tired, right? Um, but I was like, okay, if I'm going to hedge off this weight that's starting to show up, right? I want to do something that's alive. And so I took myself to a dubstep show, which is where I feel alive. I feel just alive with the bass. Um, and I think it's looking for those little moments, those little glimmers, right? Sometimes for me, it's the way like the sunlight comes in through the leaves while I'm walking my dog, or the way you have a perfect breeze on a hot day, or just the way that like dew glimmers on spider webs in the morning, right? There are so many ways to feel alive. Um, but it really takes like noticing and allowing yourself to see the beauty in that moment, to really just allowing yourself to be in the here and now.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. And next week we will have part 2 posted with Jamie Nelson. And be sure to subscribe and like, and we will see you in the next one.